Shadows of Yesterday. The rain pounded against Oliver Reed's apartment windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to his solitary evening. At 32, he had mastered the art of appearing successful while feeling incomplete. His marketing firm was thriving, his downtown Boston apartment tastefully decorated, yet Friday night still found him alone with case files and a glass of Macallan. 5 years had passed since graduation. 5 years since Nora Winters had walked out of his life, or rather since he had pushed her away. The memory had dulled somewhat, like a photograph left too long in sunlight, but never disappeared entirely. Oliver loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, trying to focus on the Henderson account rather than the storm outside. Thunder rumbled, and he remembered how Nora used to count the seconds between lightning and thunder to calculate the storm's distance. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, she would whisper, curled against him. The knock came at exactly midnight. Oliver assumed it was his neighbor, Mrs. Galloway, whose anxiety spiked during storms. He opened the door without checking the peephole, unprepared for the sight before him. Nora stood there, rain-soaked and breathless. Her dark hair, now shorter than he remembered, clung to her face. She wore a professional blazer over jeans, as though she'd left work and driven straight to his door without changing. Their eyes locked, and Oliver felt the careful walls he'd constructed crumble slightly. "Oliver," she said, her voice eerily calm despite her appearance. "I need 10 minutes of your time." His throat tightened. "How did you find me?" "Jasmine told me where your office was. I saw your car in the parking lot and I followed you home." "I know how that sounds, but please." She held up a manila envelope protected inside her jacket. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." Every instinct told Oliver to close the door to protect the life he'd rebuilt. Yet something in her expression, determination mixed with vulnerability, kept him rooted in place. 10 minutes, he agreed, stepping aside. Nora entered cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. She didn't comment on his apartment or how he'd changed. Instead, she placed the envelope on his coffee table and remained standing, water pooling beneath her shoes. "You should change," Oliver said, disappearing into his bedroom. He returned with a towel and one of his Northwestern sweatshirts. Neutral territory. "I'll make coffee." In the kitchen, Oliver gripped the counter, steadying himself. 5 years of careful avoidance undone by a knock at midnight. He'd promised himself after that spring day in Chicago that he would never let Nora affect him again. Yet here she was, and his heart raced traitorously. The coffee machine gurgled as Nora emerged from the bathroom, his sweatshirt hanging loosely on her frame. She'd always been petite, but she seemed smaller somehow, as though carrying an invisible weight. "I found something," she said, opening the envelope. "About Theo." The name alone sent a surge of anger through Oliver. His former roommate, his former friend, the man he'd caught with Nora in what looked like an unmistakable embrace. "I don't want to hear about Theo," Oliver said flatly. "You need to." Nora pulled out a handwritten letter. "Because everything you think you saw that day wasn't what happened. And I finally have proof." The weight of silence. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she placed the letter on Oliver's coffee table. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows as if demanding entry. "Before you read this," she said, settling cautiously on the edge of his sofa, "I need you to understand something. I tried to tell you the truth 5 years ago, but you wouldn't listen. You were so certain of what you saw." Oliver remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "I saw enough." The memory crashed over him with painful clarity. Walking into Theo's apartment to retrieve a textbook before finals. Finding Nora in Theo's arms, their faces close, her hands gripping his shirt. The betrayal had felt like a physical blow. He'd turned and left without a word, ignoring Nora's calls and texts for weeks afterward until graduation separated them completely. "What you saw," Nora continued carefully, "was me stopping Theo from falling." He was drunk, Oliver. He'd been drinking all afternoon after failing his architecture final. "That's not what it looked like," Oliver countered, the bitterness in his voice surprising even himself. "I know." Nora's voice softened. "But it's what happened. I went there looking for you. Theo was a mess. He'd been drinking and said some things. Disturbing things about us. About me. I was trying to help him to the couch when you walked in." Oliver's jaw tightened. "And you expect me to believe that after 5 years because of this?" Nora pushed the letter toward him. Theo sent this to my workplace 3 months ago. Oliver reluctantly picked up the letter, recognizing Theo's distinctive handwriting immediately. His eyes scanned the page, catching phrases that made his stomach clench. Never meant for things to go so far. Jealous of what you and Oliver had. Made up stories to friends afterward to save face, and finally, in rehab now, and part of making amends is telling the truth. The coffee machine beeped, offering a momentary escape. Oliver walked to the kitchen, pouring 2 cups mechanically while trying to process this new information. When he returned, Nora was looking at a framed photo on his bookshelf. The Northwestern campus in autumn, no people in the shot. He'd kept it because it reminded him of their beginning without actually showing her. You always loved fall, she murmured, accepting the coffee. Remember that picnic by the lake? You brought those terrible store-bought cookies and pretended you'd baked them. Despite himself, Oliver's lips twitched. You knew they were store-bought and ate them anyway. They tasted like cardboard, she laughed softly, the sound unlocking something in his chest. But you were so proud. They fell into silence, the weight of 5 years stretching between them. Oliver reread the letter, searching for deception but finding only Theo's rambling confession. According to the letter, Theo had harbored feelings for Nora throughout their junior year, resentful of Oliver's happiness. The day Oliver saw them, Theo had been confessing these feelings, drunk and unstable. Nora had rejected him and was helping him sit down when Oliver walked in, a moment Theo had later twisted among their mutual friends to save his pride. Why didn't you try harder to explain? Oliver asked finally, hating how petulant it sounded. I did. Nora set down her cup, meeting his gaze steadily. I called you 16 times that night. I emailed. I came to your dorm. You blocked my number, Oliver. You returned my letters unopened. What else could I have done? The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. He had been so hurt, so convinced of her betrayal that he'd erected impenetrable walls. Pride and pain had become his closest companions. There's more, Nora said quietly, reaching into the envelope again. She pulled out a flash drive. Jasmine found these when she was moving last year. Videos from Sophia's birthday party the weekend before everything happened. Oliver remembered that party, Sophia's apartment crowded with soon-to-be graduates celebrating the end of an era. He'd been working on a final project and left early, leaving Nora with their friends. There's footage of Theo, Nora continued, telling Devin that he was going to make his move after graduation, that you and I wouldn't last the summer. She twisted the flash drive between her fingers. I've had this for months. I wasn't going to come, but then his letter arrived and I just needed you to know. Oliver stared at her, seeing not just the Nora before him, but the compilation of all her versions. The laughing sophomore who'd spilled coffee on his economics textbook and insisted on buying him lunch as an apology. The focused junior who'd pulled all-nighters with him before exams. The loving girlfriend who'd planned their hypothetical future down to the names of their children. And now this new Nora, professional and composed despite the storm both outside and between them. Why now? He asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. Why after 5 years? Because, she said simply, some truths don't expire, Oliver. And I needed you to hear this one from me. Unraveling deceptions. The flash drive lay between them like a time bomb. Oliver's laptop hummed to life, the screen illuminating their faces in the dim apartment. Neither spoke as he inserted the drive, navigating to a folder labeled simply Sophia's 22nd. The video began with typical party chaos, red cups, overlapping conversations, someone attempting to dance on a coffee table. Oliver recognized their college friends so much younger, their faces unmarked by the years that had transformed his own. Then the camera panned, catching Theo in the corner with Devin Mathis, their heads close in conversation. I had to enhance the audio, Nora explained quietly. Jasmine helped. With a keystroke, Oliver increased the volume, straining to hear over the music. Just a matter of time, Theo was saying, his expression smug. Reed doesn't deserve her anyway. Too focused on his future, barely notices what he has. Devin looked uncomfortable. Man, they've been together 3 years. You're dreaming. Watch me, Theo replied, raising his cup. By the end of summer, she'll realize what she's missing. Oliver paused the video, his pulse pounding in his ears. There's more? Nora nodded. Skip to the 3rd file. This clip showed Theo, considerably drunker, cornering Jasmine in the kitchen.
Has she ever said anything about me?
About us? Jasmine looked confused. Who, Nora? There is no us with you and Nora. She's with Oliver. Has been forever. She looks at me sometimes, Theo insisted. I see it. Reed's too busy building his empire to notice she's unhappy. You're drunk, Jasmine said firmly. And wrong. Go sleep it off. As the video continued, Oliver felt a creeping sickness. How had he missed this? Theo had been his roommate for 2 years, a friend he'd trusted. The jealousy, the plotting, it had been happening right under his nose. I never knew, he said finally. None of us did, Nora replied. Not until it was too late. Oliver closed the laptop, needing a moment to process. The apartment felt suddenly airless, constricting around memories he'd suppressed for years. What happened after graduation? He asked, realizing he knew nothing of her life since Northwestern. Nora tucked her hair behind her ear, a familiar gesture that sent an unwelcome pang through him. I moved to Philadelphia for grad school as planned. Finished my degree in art restoration. I'm at the Gardner Museum now. Boston, Oliver said, connecting the dots. You've been here how long? Almost 2 years. She met his gaze evenly. I wasn't hiding, Oliver. We have mutual friends. You could have found me if you'd wanted to. The implication hung heavily between them. He hadn't wanted to. Or rather, he'd wanted to and fought against that want with every ambitious project, every 70-hour work week, every meaningless date that never developed into anything substantial. Theo's in Seattle now, Nora continued. According to his letter, he's been sober 8 months. The program made him reach out. Oliver stood abruptly, needing movement. So what now? We've unmasked the villain. Mystery solved. What exactly are you looking for here, Nora? She flinched slightly at his tone, but held her ground. Closure, maybe. Or just truth. Don't you think we deserve that much? Truth, Oliver repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. The truth is that I spent 5 years believing something that wasn't real, building my life around an absence I thought was justified. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. 5 years, Nora, we can't get that back. I'm not asking for it back, she said quietly. I'm just asking you to stop carrying this weight. For both our sakes. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, the storm moving past them. Oliver checked his watch, nearly 2 a.m. Their 10 minutes had stretched into hours. There's someone else in your life? He asked suddenly, the question escaping before he could examine why it mattered. A small smile touched Nora's lips. Would it be easier for you if there was? Probably, he admitted. Then I'm sorry to disappoint you. There have been relationships, but nothing. She trailed off, looking away. Nothing that felt right. The unspoken comparison hung between them. Nothing that felt like us. Oliver moved to the window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. College seemed like another lifetime. The certainty of youth, the conviction that they had everything figured out. They'd planned trips to Greece, discussed which neighborhoods in Chicago would be best for raising children, debated the merits of golden retrievers versus shelter mutts. All those future memories, erased in an instant by a misunderstanding and his stubborn refusal to listen. I need to talk to Theo, he said finally. Nora looked surprised. He's in Seattle. I told you, not in person, but I need to hear it from him directly. She nodded slowly. His number's in the letter. Last page. As Oliver retrieved the letter, their fingers brushed a momentary contact that nonetheless sent electricity up his arm. For the first time he really looked at her. Beyond the shock of her presence, there were new lines around her eyes, a maturity to her features that hadn't existed before. But her eyes were the same deep brown that had once been his entire world. Stay, he said impulsively. It's late and the guest room is made up. We can talk more tomorrow. Nora hesitated, clearly weighing the implications. Are you sure? He wasn't sure of anything except that he wasn't ready for her to disappear again. Not with so many unraveled threads between them. Yes, he said. I'm sure. As he showed her to the guest room, Oliver felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The truth, it seemed, had been waiting patiently for 5 years, ready to be heard when he was finally ready to listen. The bridge between worlds. Morning arrived with tentative sunlight filtering through Oliver's blinds. He'd slept fitfully, his dreams populated by fragments of the past. Nora laughing on the northwestern quad, Theo's concealed resentment, the years of silence that followed. When he finally emerged from his bedroom, he found Nora in his kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee on the counter. "Hope you still take it black," she said, pushing one toward him. "Some habits don't change," he replied, accepting the mug gratefully. They settled at his small dining table, the night's revelations sitting heavily between them. Oliver had spent hours after Nora went to bed reading and rereading Theo's letter, searching for inconsistencies but finding only painful honesty. "I called him," Oliver admitted. "This morning while you were still asleep?" Nora's eyes widened. "What did he say?" "Everything in the letter is true." Oliver traced the rim of his mug. He apologized, said he'd been carrying it for years. The drinking got worse after graduation. He felt guilty but couldn't admit what he'd done. "And what did you say?" "Not much," Oliver met her gaze. "What can you say to someone who deliberately derailed your life?" The silence that followed felt weighted with possibilities and regrets. Outside, Boston was coming alive, Saturday morning traffic creating a distant hum. "I have tickets," Nora said suddenly, "for the Rivera exhibition at the MFA this afternoon. Would you want to come?" It was such a normal suggestion, so divorced from the emotional excavation of the previous night, that Oliver found himself nodding before he could overthink it. The Museum of Fine Arts buzzed with weekend visitors, but Oliver barely noticed them. Walking beside Nora felt surreally familiar, her slight hesitation before each new painting, the way she tilted her head when considering a particularly complex piece. They moved through the exhibition in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging observations. Oliver, Nora, oh my God. They turned simultaneously to find Sophia Chen approaching, her expression cycling through disbelief to delight. "I thought that was you two. Together." Sophia embraced Nora warmly before turning to Oliver with questioning eyes. "How long has this reunion been in the works?" "It's recent," Nora explained carefully. "Very recent. Well, it's about time," Sophia declared. "The group has a text thread dedicated to Oliver and Nora, the tragic romance." "You're exaggerating," Oliver said, embarrassed. "Barely. Listen, we're having dinner at Devon's place tonight. You both should come." Her eyes sparkled with matchmaking enthusiasm. "Everyone would love to see you." After Sophia left, promising to text details, Oliver and Nora exchanged uncertain looks. "We don't have to go," Nora offered. "Maybe we should," Oliver surprised himself by saying. "Rip off the Band-Aid. Face the firing squad of friends who apparently never gave up on us." That evening, stepping into Devon's apartment felt like crossing a threshold between worlds. Their college friends greeted them with knowing smiles and 2 casual questions about how they'd reconnected. Oliver found himself relaxing as the night progressed, watching Nora laugh with Jasmine, seamlessly fitting back into the group as though the years apart had been merely a pause. "Not an ending, so," Devon said quietly, joining Oliver on the balcony where he'd stepped out for air. "You and Nora, for real?" "It's complicated," Oliver admitted. "Life's complicated, man." Devon leaned against the railing. "But some things are worth figuring out." As the night wound down, Jasmine pulled Oliver aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her expression serious. "About that day with Theo. I knew what really happened. Nora called me right after you left, hysterical." Oliver stiffened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried. Remember that coffee I insisted on before graduation? You shut me down completely, said you were moving forward and didn't want to discuss the past." She squeezed his arm. "You were so hurt, so convinced. Sometimes people can only hear the truth when they're ready." The ride back to Oliver's apartment was quiet, both processing the evening. Their friends had treated them like an established couple, as if the 5-year gap had been imagined rather than lived. "They never stopped seeing us as Oliver and Nora," he observed, pulling into his parking spot. "We were pretty inseparable." She smiled faintly. "The golden couple. Everyone's relationship goal. Except it wasn't perfect, was it?" Oliver said, turning off the engine. "Even before Theo, I was obsessed with post-graduation plans, with building the future. Maybe I didn't see what was happening right in front of me." Nora's expression softened. "We were 22, Oliver. Both figuring things out. The only mistake was not talking enough. Me about Theo's behavior, you about your fears." As they climbed the stairs to his apartment, Oliver realized something had shifted. The anger that had fueled him for years had begun to dissolve, leaving behind a hollow space, one that ached to be filled with something better than resentment. The courage to begin again. Sunday morning arrived with a clarity that seemed symbolic after the turbulence of the weekend. Oliver found Nora already dressed, preparing to leave. "You're going?" he asked, surprised at his own disappointment. "I should." She gathered her things, placing Theo's letter back in its envelope. "We've covered a lot of ground. Maybe we both need time to process." Oliver nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words even as he resisted it. "Can I drive you home?" Her apartment was in Cambridge, a small but bright space filled with art books and plants. Oliver waited awkwardly at her door, unsure of the appropriate goodbye for whatever this reunion had become. "Thank you," he said finally, "for having the courage to show up at midnight, for not giving up on the truth." Nora smiled, the familiar curve of her lips sending a pang through his chest. Some things are worth fighting for, even years later. The week that followed felt like existing in two timelines simultaneously. Oliver moved through his normal routine: client meetings, project deadlines, evening runs along the Charles River, while his mind continuously circled back to Nora, to revelations and possibilities. They texted cautiously. Museum recommendations. A funny story about a restoration project gone wrong. Nothing too personal. Nothing that acknowledged the magnitude of what had transpired between them. Until Friday, exactly 1 week after her midnight appearance, when Oliver found himself standing in front of the Gardner Museum at closing time. Nora emerged, surprise evident on her face. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" He held up a paper bag. "I brought terrible store-bought cookies, and I was hoping you might want to take a walk." Her laugh, that familiar heartfelt sound, washed over him like a benediction. They walked to a nearby park, settling on a bench as the early evening light bathed the trees in gold. "I've been thinking," Oliver began, choosing his words carefully, "about time. How we can't get those 5 years back, but maybe that's not what matters most." Nora unwrapped a cookie, breaking it in half. "What does matter then?" "The truth, understanding, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe the chance to see what happens next, without the weight of misunderstandings between us." She studied him, her expression thoughtful. "Are you saying you want to try again? Because, Oliver, we're different people now. We can't just pick up where we left off." "I know." He turned to face her fully. "I don't want to go backward. The people we were at 22 had their time, but maybe the people we are now deserve a chance to know each other. No expectations, no predetermined path, just possibility." Nora was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she took a deliberate bite of the cookie and grimaced theatrically. "These are even worse than the ones from college," she declared. Oliver laughed, tension breaking. "I specifically asked for the driest ones they had." Such dedication. Her smile faded into something more serious. "I'd like that, Oliver. A new beginning." Slowly. As the evening deepened around them, they walked through the park, reintroducing themselves not as the love-struck college students they had been, but as the adults they had become, shaped by loss, strengthened by time, and perhaps wiser for having known both connection and its absence. When Oliver finally walked Nora to her door, their goodbye wasn't laden with the weight of the past, but with the gentle anticipation of what might come next. "Coffee next week?" he suggested. "A real date this time." "I'd like that." Nora hesitated, then stood on tiptoe to kiss his cheek lightly. "Good night, Oliver." As he walked back to his car, Oliver realized that the promise he'd made to never love her again had been broken the moment she appeared at his door. Some bonds, it seemed, were strong enough to weather even the harshest storms, bending but never truly breaking, waiting patiently for the moment when two people found their way back to the truth, and perhaps to each other, not as they were, but as they could be. Not erasing the past, but building something new from its lessons. One step, one conversation, one moment of honesty at a time.